Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this presentation. My name is Teacher Eduardo, and this is a presentation geared towards the APA Citation Guidelines. This is a basic beginner's guide for university students. We're just going to go over some of the basics of how to um, do APA citations, to list book sources, and also to cite authors within our writing. So let's get going here with this presentation. Right, so the points that we will be covering here today, first we'll get into some basic notions of why it is important to use citations to list sources. We'll also get into some ideas for the bibliography in relation to books. Also, we'll get into the actual parts. We'll go section by section. We'll also talk about the bibliography in relation to internet sources. So this is a whole new idea because now with internet and everything, we need to be careful with who or what we're citing when it is a digital source of this nature. And finally, we'll talk about some of the actual in-text citations. We'll see some examples, some basic formatting, so that you can get going with your next essay, your next academic article that you're going to be writing. Right, so let's get into it here. Why is it important? Why is it important to cite authors, to reference other people and what they have done when I'm writing about a certain topic? Well, there's a few ideas here that we want to consider. First of them is, we need to remember that we're citing or we're consulting other people because it's used for research and furthering current knowledge. So that information that I'm getting, that I'm citing, is not just because the teacher told me that I need to do it or because the school is telling me to do it. It's just an academic and a science way of doing things, a scientific way of doing things, of taking knowledge that is inherited from people that have already done research in this field, and you're taking that knowledge and you're creating something new. You're creating new content. You're either explaining it, you're exposing it, or you're adding through your reasoning, through your logical research. So that's very important to do in that sense. Another reason why it is important to cite authors is because it shows you're up to date with the theories and practices in the field of study. You might be writing about any specific topic. However, your ideas might be outdated. So if you include citations from authors that have done studies in recent years, you give that validity and that currentness to your writings. So it's very important to cite authors maybe between 10 to 20 years. You don't want to go too far back. Another reason why it is important to cite authors within your writings is because it's not necessary to reinvent the wheel. You might think that if you're going to write something about didactic material, that you need to explain everything that there is to explain about it, when in fact maybe other authors have already explained it. They've dedicated years to that, so all you need to do is cite them within your writings, and you don't need to explain much other than that. You can actually let the other author explain it for you by citing him or her. So in that way, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, as we say. And also, once again, as you're doing those citations, you need to give credit where credit is due. So it is very important that you follow a certain standard so that when somebody else is reading you, somebody in the field can identify how you're taking information from other people. And also when you're reading somebody else's work, you understand how they're taking information from other people. So by having these standards, it allows us to get to that primary source of information. Also, do consider that your ideas are actually a synthesis of a world of knowledge that is around you. So because we're social beings, we work in society, we're constantly exposed to other people, to ideas, to information from all over. So everything you know is in fact a synthesis. Now, when you're writing academically in a serious manner, what you need to do is you need to break apart that synthesis, and you need to identify where those bits of information are coming from. And that is the citation that we need. So you can't just start writing just as a gut feeling, as something of an impulse, because it's a synthetic or a synthesis of information that you know, but you're not making reference to anybody. You actually have to break it down. And that's where those citations come in, as I'm mentioning. Um, so be sure to always look at the information in its most elemental stage and not in a global area. Right. Also, something in a positive note here also, you can also consider that your research, whatever you're writing, if you're following the academic standards, somebody else can cite you. If maybe your article or your essay, you submit it to a newsletter, to a journal of some kind, and it gets published, that means that because you follow these standards, other people can actually cite you now. So that's actually a very good thing when you come across another reading and you find a quote and it turns out that you were the one that came up with that quote. So that can actually happen if you dedicate time to developing your writing skills, to properly citing other authors, and to submitting articles to journals. This actually can happen. And finally, another reason here of why it is important to use citations is basically to avoid plagiarism. So remembering that plagiarism is basically stealing or using other people's ideas and saying that they are your own, when in fact it is obviously not the case. This is a very serious thing to do. It's taken very seriously by teachers and by academic institutions. It can vary in the degree of consequence, but still there is. You can lose a lot. You can lose the grade for that assignment, and it can be as severe as being expelled from the academic institution. So do avoid plagiarism at all costs. You don't want to be expelled in that manner. Also, if you're in the field, if you're already a professional and you submit an article to a newsletter or a journal, and they detect that your article is plagiarist, that you're taking ideas from other people and assuming that they are your own, that also has some very serious repercussions. You can be fined, you can be legally sued, and you can also be publicly discredited. And the repercussion after that is nobody will take you seriously. So very important to always cite your authors. You're already researching, so it's just building that list of citations of book references and properly including them in your writings. Right, so let's get then into the bibliography in relation to actual physical books. Right, so your bibliography or your bibliography section is basically your list of books that you have consulted for the research that you're writing up. Now, in your bibliography, you only want to list those books which you actually are citing within your writing. If for some reason you consulted 20 books, but within your writing you're only citing 10 authors or 10 books, then only those 10 books are the ones that you're going to include here. The ones that you're not, well, that you just shouldn't, because they are not part of your development. Okay, so let's get a little bit here into building a bibliography listing. It has a series of parts, about 4 to 5 parts. So we'll look at each one individually, and then we'll look at some examples of how it is all put together. So the first thing, or the first item in your listing here is going to be the author. So the first thing you're mentioned is the author's name. And this has a few characteristics, which we have here on the top. First thing is you're going to list the name, the last name of the author, and the first letter has to be in capitals. Then you're going to use a comma, and then you're going to use the initial of the first name of the author, and that has to be also in capital letter, and you're going to finalize on a period. And here we have a few practical examples. So notice the first capital letter on the last name. This is the last name, comma, initial of the first name, capital letter, and we finalize on a period. So we have Thornberry, comma, S, period. Here we have last name, comma, first letter, capital of the first name, and finalize on a period. Harmer, comma, J, period. Comma, P, period, and Richards, comma, J, period. And that's how you start a book listing with the author. Now, this is fairly simple, very straightforward when you have just one author, but a lot of times it turns out that you have multiple authors. So here we have some examples for that. When you have two authors, well, you just repeat it. Whatever you have here, you just repeat it by two. So we have the last name, comma, initial of first name, period. We're going to put a comma, and then we're going to use an ampersand. Remember, the ampersand means and. And then we repeat, last name, comma, initial first name, period. So Halliday, comma, M, period, comma, and Hassan, comma, R, period. So that's when you have two. But when you have three, well, it's fairly the same idea, you just extend it a little more. So here we have author number 1, comma, author number 2, comma, and author number 3, final period. So imagine this is very similar to when you're doing a list within a sentence. Let's say you're going to list so 3 places where you went. So you could say something like, yesterday I went to school, to the cafe, and to the park. So in the way that in that listing you would put commas, in the same way here you need those commas to separate, and then but this is the ampersand, the last one. So fairly straightforward. Just put those commas and put that ampersand and you're good to go. The ampersand, just final note here, goes right before the last one. Okay, you don't want to put Halliday and M and Harmer J and. It's just next to the last one. Now, there are times when you have listings of a big number of contributors to a publication. We're talking 9, 10, 11, or 12. It's rare, but it does tend to happen at times. It's important to note that in an APA style bibliography, you can only list a number of 7 authors for one publication. So what we're going to do here, it's going to be apparent here in a moment, we go in this manner. So we go author number 1, comma, author number 2, comma, author number 3, comma, number 4, comma, 5, comma, 6, comma, ellipses. You'll notice here I put 3 periods. This represents an ellipsis and basically is telling the reader that there are more authors here, but I've reached the limit based on my guidelines for listing books. So just understand that there are more authors here for this book that I'm not going to list here. And I'm going to list the last one. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, ellipsis, 7. You can list a maximum of 7 authors in your bibliography for one publication. Okay, and that's basically how you do it for multiple authors when it comes going up to the limit of 7. Next point to take into consideration is the year of publication. So the year of publication is basically, well, very like the name says, the year the book was published for the first time. And we're going to put this in the parentheses. And we don't want to confuse this with the reprint date. You'll find many times that a book becomes popular. So let's say that on the publication date, they emitted 200,000 copies. it became so popular that they did a reprint of that book. They didn't modify anything, they just reprinted it. So in that reprint, they include an additional date, which is the date of the reprint, and then maybe it got up to a third reprint, so it'll have an additional date also. So don't be confused for those reprints, because they're not changing any content, it's just a reprint. So we want to get the year of publication, not of reprint. These are two different things. So look for the publication date. And here we have some examples of that. 2001, just the year in 4-digit format within parentheses, and that's it, really. So we have the author name, then we have the year of publication. The next item here is the book title. So the book title has its own characteristics that we need to pay attention to. So we begin with the title of the book. In this case, you're going to capitalize the first letter of the title. You're going to find that in a lot of books, they use their own formats and their own standards depending on the design of the book. They have other guidelines, but we need to unify that. So even if the book title has all capitals, or has lowercase and uppercase, or has italics, or has underlines, or whatever it might have, you have to strip it away, and you're going to capitalize the first letter, and you're going to italicize the title of the book. Okay? The subtitle, you're going to want to keep that in normal font. So just the book title, so that you can clearly tell the reader this is the title of the book. Out of all of these words and numbers that are mixed up in one line, I can clearly identify what the book title is. And what you're going to use a colon to separate the subtitle from the title. Okay, this way we don't have a run-on, and you don't know if it's a very long book title or what. So that colon is going to help us separate what is what. And we're going to finish on a period as well. So here's some practical examples of that. Here we have a course in language teaching, book title, subtitle, there's a semicolon, right there, the 2 dots. Practice in theory, final period. English as a global language, final period. There is no subtitle, so we just finalize on the period. And here we have how to teach English, semicolon, an introduction to the practice of English teaching, final period. So here we have some examples with just the book title and book title with subtitles. Moving on then, and here's the last actually, we're going to unite the 2 elements into one. We're going to talk here location and publisher. These kind of go hand in hand, so I'm going to list them here together. So talking about the location here, you want to name the city and the state. The state when available. You'll find that in many countries they politically don't divide it by states for some reason. So if there is no state, well, you just don't use it. But when there is, you want to put it in there. Also, for talking about the state, you want to use a postal abbreviation and no periods. So we'll see here some practical examples of that. Also, you want to write the name of the publishing house. So that when we say publisher, we mean the publishing house. Who is publishing this book, right? As before, you want to use a colon as a separator between the publisher, the location, and publisher, just like we have in the example up here. That is a colon. And some practical examples of that. Well, here we have New York. That would be the city. And Y would be the abbreviation of the state, semicolon, publisher, in this case, Cambridge. Here we have another one, Cambridge, semicolon, Cambridge. Turns out that Cambridge is a city in the UK, but there is no state, so we don't put it. But there is also a publisher called Cambridge, so that's why you have that repetition right there. One is the city, the other is a publisher. Another one here is we have Oxford, no state, Macmillan Heinemann. That's the publisher right here. That's the location right there. So that's how you add that final element to the book listing in your bibliography. Right. So let's see here some practical examples of that. So once you've completed your essay or your article, at the end of that, you want to include your title bibliography. Okay, so and after this is you're going to start listing all of the resources, all of the sources that you consulted, which helped you to develop that writing that's above here. So I think that if you start to identify these or read these, you'll notice that you can actually understand what they are about. Here we have the author name, the publication year, the name of the book. The book is just called Grammar. This is where it was published, and this is who published it. Here again, we have an author name, who published in this year. He published an Introduction to Functional Grammar. This was in London, and Edward Arnold was the publisher. Here we have another one, and you'll notice this is fairly long. We have here two authors published in 2011. They published Teaching Grammar in Second Language Classrooms, subtitle Integrating Form-Focused Instruction in Communicative Context, published in Abingdon, Routledge. Now, you'll notice here we have a very long subtitle. Don't be afraid of those very long subtitles. You have to write everything. Okay, even if it comes down to 2, 3, 4 lines, you have to write all of the information, no abbreviations. Again, write everything. So don't be afraid of those very long titles. Here we have another one, 2 authors, book title, there you go, Thornberry, Uncovering Grammar, Oxford, Macmillan, Heinemann. So those are the basic parts for building up your bibliography in your academic essay or your article using APA guidelines. Okay, moving on here to internet sources. So books are fairly easy in that we have the standards are very clear. Publications, even a lot of publications will include the actual APA listing of, so you just basically copy that. However, it is not the case for internet sources. And internet sources, it's much more diverse because we have such a big variety of presenting information on the internet. We'll have standard web pages, we'll have blog posts, we'll have wiki pages, we'll have videos, we can have presentations, we can have PDF files. So the combination of content is just basically infinite, or so it seems. So that presents some complications when citing in a serious manner in an academic publication. However, there are some standards that we can follow in APA, and they will guide us. If it so happens that for your specific source you don't have a specific guideline, then what you want to do is you want to take the closest one and use that one instead. Right, so again, trying to understand here a few things on internet, because internet does have some particular things to consider. Initially, you want to be careful with information you find on the internet, because do remember that technology, what it is nowadays, pretty much anybody can go online, create a web page, create a blog post, create a wiki page, and just write anything they want and convey that information as a fact. When they're not citing any authors, there's no bibliography, there's no reference list, it's just their ideas. So this is fine, but you can't use it as an academic serious source. So be wary of those type of publications. Just don't trust them. Because it's so easy and it's so accessible, really most of what's on the internet is unreliable, and you have to think about it like that. You have to, your first impulse should be, I don't trust this resource. However, you have to have a set of guidelines, and once those markers, those flags come up, you can say, okay, so my initial assumption was not to trust it, but now that all the flags came up and they're green, then I do trust it. But here, like they say in the United States, innocent until proven guilty. Here you have to think unreliable until proven reliable. It would be your idea here for internet sources. So yeah, you have to look for specific markers to validate those sources. There is very good information out there, but you can't use just any website. You can't just use any video or any blog for a serious academic publication. Even if you're a student, like this video is intended for students, even if you're going to write something for a class, for your teacher, for an assignment, uh, you still you want to look for just very certain information, not any website, not any blog post. It's just building up that good practice of how doing things in the right way, so that when you're doing it for real out as a professional, then you already have some good experience background on how to do it, and not because the teacher was lenient and accepted an unreliable source. Uh, that's not going to be the case with a serious newsletter. So no matter the case, you always want to validate your sources. And also, be sure to check with your teacher for any further details on internet sources. You might want to, the best thing to do is you might want to go up to your teacher, talk to him or her in person, or send an email, and just say, I'm thinking of using internet sources for this assignment, and I think that these are the things I should be looking for, but do you have any guidelines that you can tell me, so I can also include that when I am validating sources on the internet. So do get your teacher involved so that he or she can assist you further in how to select sources, valid sources. So this is an initial list. Again, you do want to consult with your own teachers or your tutor or your faculty or institution on if there are some official guidelines for your area. But this is an initial list that you can take, and it'll give you a good guideline to look for specific markers on that internet source that you're thinking about using on your academic essay. Maybe it's not a good resource to use, or maybe it is. So let's just go through this list briefly here. So the first thing you want to look for is who is the author, who is writing this, or is this a sponsored page? Is somebody paying to have this up there? Maybe it's not an author, maybe it's an institution, maybe it's a publishing house. So you want to know who is writing this. Right? We might say author, but it could be an institution of sorts. So, but there has to be a clear reference to the writer or writers. Also, is content information provided? So you want to look for a reference to an about section for the author or institution. Is there an email address provided? Is there a telephone number? Is there a real world address there to some sort of P.O. box or some school or academic institution? Having those markers there gives additional validity to that source, that it's a trusted source. So look for contact information. It has to be up there. Is there a copyright symbol on the page? This is also something very good because it gives that additional validity. That means that the author or institution have actually gone through legal processes to certify that their content is original. So so look for that. That would be a very good sign. Also, is this a zombie page? You want to look. You want to, once you're reading that page or blog post, you want to see that. Now, a zombie page is basically a web page that was published a long time ago by an author, and that author has not done any recent activity on the blog or web page. So let's say that you find this great blog post which was published 8 years ago, and in those 8 years the author has not published anything new. So while that particular blog post is valid information, or could be valid information, the author has not furthered his research in new knowledge. So that blog post is kind of left hanging in time, So you might want to use it, you might not want to use it. Perhaps the best thing to do here is to consult, again, your teacher or institution and see their criteria, and then get some feedback from them if you want to use that zombie page or not. Also, what is the purpose of the page? Um, why was that page written? You want to identify that. Was it written to convince you? Was it written because it was biased? Was it written just to provide information? What's the purpose of having that content in that specific web page or blog post? How well organized is the page? Was this web page, can you see that this web page was organized by a 15-year-old or a 5-year-old or a serious professor or academic? Uh, just the organization will tell you a lot about the author. Is the information on the page primary or secondary? So there's a big difference if maybe the author is a researcher and through this web page or blog post is providing the details of his or her research. So that's a primary source because the author directly is presenting his or her results. Or is it a secondary where maybe it's a news center and they're just reporting on what the author said in his or her original blog post? That would be a secondary source. So you always want to try and find the primary source. Sometimes it is a bit impossible to get to the primary source, so you do go through the secondary source. But whenever you can, locate that primary source and use that primary source in your own research. Can you verify the information? This is to say, is it presenting a bibliography of its own? And if so, can you actually look for those books on the internet? Can you maybe Google it? Can you actually find those books? Are the authors of those books serious people, and are they actually presenting valid topics? Do they have their own websites? Do they have their own contact information up there? So you don't want to actually start reading those books, but you do want to identify that they are real people, real institutions, and that they are trustworthy. So that's how you can verify the author for the web page that you're interested in. And finally, does the web page or does the author cite other authors? Right? Is it just like you're trying to cite authors? Is this source citing its own authors, other sources? That is also very important. If you have this great blog post, for example, and all of these markers go up, they're green, green, green all across the board, and then you come to this one and you go, well, yeah, but does not include a bibliography and is not citing authors, then you might not want to use that because it's not applying to the standards that you're following, so it's very difficult for you to actually follow that. So these are just some initial questions that you might want to consider when validating your internet sources. But for the most part, like I said, if you're doubtful about that web page, like you don't know if to use it or not, if you initially just don't know, then just don't use it. If in case you do have the criteria to say, well, I think I can use it, it is looking promising, then yeah, then identify it even further and try and see if it actually passes the full set list of criteria. Right, so to list an internet source basically follows the same structure as a book source. Obviously, we're going to change a few things because of the nature of the internet, which is not present in books, and vice versa. But for the most part, it's pretty much the same. So we're just going to dig in here to the structure of the internet sources. So here's your basic skeleton, where you're listing your authors right here. Just like in books, you put the publication date, then you get into the title of the article or publication. If this is part of a journal or newsletter, then that goes right after. Those generally take a volume number, so that'll go right immediately after that, separated by a comma. Final period there, and then this is a new part, very particular to internet sources, retrieved on certain date from the full URL. Okay, this is very important. A lot of times they don't include this on date. This is, I find, very important because the initial publication on the internet might have been done maybe, let's say, 2005. But if you don't include this, then I don't know when you consulted this information. So that argues against the the current value that your writing might have. However, if you do include it, then I can actually compare and contrast when this was published versus when you consulted it. So it gives me a good reference point for that. So I'm putting it here in brackets because it's kind of optional. Some people use it, other people don't, but I highly recommend that you do use it. And again, when you're putting the URL, be sure to copy paste the complete URL, even if it has those crazy symbols and all. You have to put everything. It has to be a valid URL so you can actually click on it. If you're, for example, writing on a blog post or on a website, then that'll be a clickable link. So you want it to be functional. So here's a practical example of that. We have an author, publication, titles, website, retrieved from. This one doesn't have a date, retrieval date. We do have the link, but not a retrieval date. And notice, so this was published in 2002. But when was it consulted? Maybe was it consulted right after in 2002, in 2005? Was it consulted last week? Was it consulted today? I don't know. So that says a lot about who's writing this. So again, try and conclude that. Here we have another one. This is from a blog post. When it's possible for you to add the complete date, do so. Again, this adds more validity to the content. Here's the blog post, the blog title. So this is for the specific post. This is for the entire blog, the title. Retrieved from, and here's a longer link, which again, you need to include the whole thing. Again, no consultation, no retrieval date is included, so I can't actually reference from when this was published to when it was consulted. That's basically the format. You'll notice that, so this is just a basic standard. You'll see variations, but again, this is because of the same nature of the internet and how it changes so much. But ultimately, you want to include author names, publication title, a web page title, or blog post or blog title. For the times when you don't have a journal or volume number, we simply don't include it. So if there's a title of the article, you just stop there and jump right into the retrieval date and URL. So you kind of have to, whatever information you have available, that's what you put. What you don't have, you don't put. Other times you'll find situations or circumstances where there is no author. Maybe the author, it has all of the other things, and you can actually use this resource, but the author is not being named as an author. So that's okay. Just simply don't include the author. Maybe there's not a publication date. So there's little things like that you need to take into consideration. And again, you can search for them on the internet and see what is valid and what is not, or you can also consult with your teacher, and he or she can tell you some additional guidelines in that regard. Right, moving on here. So now that we have listed our physical book resources and we've listed our internet resources, identified what is valid and what is not, and we've just taken those that are serious publications on the internet. So now we want to take the information and the quotes that we've gathered, and we want to include that within our writing. Great. So this next section is for that. Right. So before we actually get into how to do that, let's identify just some initial assumptions, just like we've done before. So the first thing here is citing authors validates your claims beyond a reason of a doubt. Think of it like that. And here's a very perhaps silly example, but it definitely proves the point. Let's say that you suddenly state that the sky is purple just because it was a moment of reflection that you had, and you just say to everybody, the sky is purple. Try and do that experiment and go out with your friends, with people you know, and just say, the sky is not blue, the sky is purple. And notice their reaction. They're probably not going to believe you. This is because they have reason to believe they have reason to doubt what you're saying because uh, they also have eyes and they also have perception and they can see that the sky is blue, yet you're saying it's something different from what they're seeing. So they have a reason to doubt you. But what if you say, well, the sky is the sky is not blue, the sky is purple. And I'm stating this claim because so and so author have done certain research in the area of optics, and they have come to realize that because of light refraction, people say or we perceive the sky to be blue, but in fact, because of these certain elements in relation to the atmosphere and certain conditions in the environment, we perceive blue, but in fact, it is purple. So notice there, I was referencing some survey, some research that has been done in the field, and I can either say that first and then say that the sky is purple, or I can state my claim and then reference the research. And now people are going to start believing you, and that's because there is no your claim is stated as true beyond a reason of a doubt because you're citing authors, and that is the importance of citing authors within your writing. Again, that was a very silly example, perhaps, but it proves the point. Also, you can. So here are some reasons or some purposes that you can find for citing authors. You don't want to just cite authors for the sake of citing authors. You have to have a purpose, a driving force of why you're doing this. So one good reason is to cite definitions from several authors, and then in the writing, you analyze those definitions. So you're pulling in all of these resources from authors, and then for your reader, in your discourse, you explicitly analyze those definitions. And you're basically telling your reader how this should be understood. So this is a great way of doing that. Something, for example, if you're talking about something like intelligence. Intelligence is really hard to define. So what you need to do, if you want to explain intelligence to your reader, then what you need to do is you need to take maybe 2, 3, or 5 different definitions from different authors, and you present, well, this author defines intelligence in this way. However, notice that his or her definition is lacking for this other thing. The second author defines intelligence in this other way. It is a much improved definition, however, still lacking, and you carry on until you cite all of the authors. So you're showing your reader that you've investigated and that you've researched what intelligence is, and you actually know what you're saying, and then you ultimately come to a final conclusion of what intelligence is. But by the time you get to that, the reader already, you've guided the reader in certain paths, so he or she will understand what you're saying now. And that's another purpose of why to cite authors. Cite an author and explain to your reader what it means. A much more straightforward approach. You just basically include the citation of the author and then explain what it is. Now, what you don't want to do here is you don't want to just cite the author and then just repeat his or her words, or maybe just use your own words to say exactly the same thing. If you're going to explain something that an author said, you should understand that you're going to explain something, but you're going to add something to it too, maybe your own personal opinion. But because you've started with a formal citation, then now you can add your own opinion, and it'll be valid because it's built. Your opinion now is built on the serious foundation, which is citing the author. So that's another way or purpose of why to cite authors. Something you want to avoid here is citing the same author over and over again. This is a very common practice, especially with new writers, new academic writers, students, university students. We find only one author, and we find 10 great quotations from that author, and we include them all almost back to back. This is just something you don't want to do. You don't want to rely your complete essay on just one author. It just shows that you were perhaps lazy, you didn't actually think about it that much, uh, and just citing one person shows that your grasp of the field is very narrow. So do avoid just relying all of your notions on one author. You want to think about 3 to 5 books, or 3 to 5 authors as a standard, right? You also might want to consult with your teacher or with your institution if they have certain guidelines as to what is the minimum for book references or author references. But as a general notion, for university students, you want to think between 3 and 5. The more you can add, the better. And also here, finally, well, just citing authors just shows that you've read about the topic that you're arguing or presenting. It shows that you have reflected on it deeply, and it also shows that you've analyzed it. And now you're giving your logical and reasoned conclusions on it. You might argue certain aspects. You might develop others. You might explain certain definitions, but you're doing it not because you're discovering it at that moment, but because it's for the reader, so that the reader understands where you're coming from, what path you took, and how you got to where you are in your reasoning. And that's more or less the importance of doing this. Right. So moving on then to our next slide. Now, how to do it then? So how do we cite authors in our writings, in our paragraphs, in our sentences? Well, there's actually a variety of ways. We're going to keep it very simple here, just the more straightforward, just to kind of get you going. And as you develop practice, you can start experimenting a little more. But initially, you can do direct references to what the author said. So this means that you're going to use quotation marks, and you're going to pretty much copy paste what the author wrote in his or her publication, and you're going to put it right in your own writing. But again, you need to use quotation marks for that. Yes. Now, if you're going to paraphrase, that means you're going to change a bit of the words, but just keep the same idea. Then obviously you don't want to use quotation marks. The basic idea of what the author said is still there. You're just kind of saying it with your own words. Very important here to note, sometimes we have quotations that are fairly big. When they exceed 40 words, what you need to do, you can't just integrate it into your paragraph. You actually have to offset it to your paragraphs. What this basically means is, as you're writing your paragraph, like let's say like this, so here comes your paragraph, and then you need to insert a quotation that's longer than 40 words. So you come here, you put the semicolon right there, you create a new line, and you're going to indent 1/2 inch on this side, 1/2 inch on this side. And then that quotation is going to be like in the middle of the page with those margins on each side. And when you're done, you go back to the left margin all the way, and then you carry on to this margin. So you have these two margins, like here, visually. And that's how you do those long quotations. Okay, you can't insert them within the paragraph. Okay, so practically speaking here, here are some examples of how you can reference other people within your writing. Just to give you a short list here of verbs that you could use, if you want to do it in an organic, naturally flowing way within your discourse, you can use verbs like posited, stated, showed, questioned, confirmed, validated, explained, discovered, amongst many others. That, and then you put the quotation or the citation. Okay. Another way of doing that is, maybe I don't want to include the author name within my discourse, so I can offset the author with the parentheses and the publication date, like here. So as has been shown, and then you carry on here with the citation. So we really don't read the authors, but we need to cite them still. Or maybe I do want to include the authors within my text. So I include the authors' names as certain authors, but then I need to put the publication date within the parentheses, demonstrated. So here I'm taking a verb, not using any ones from here, but just using a different one because this is what I want to explain, and then I follow up with whatever they said, or in this case, demonstrated. Another way of doing that is starting with the author's publication date, found that, and then you carry on to whatever citation or text you're extracting from their publication. Still, another way of doing that is through this way, but this is a very special way of doing it for certain conditions. You will find, just like we had that special condition in the bibliography where we had to use the ellipsis, which was the 3 points when we had 7 or more authors, in the same manner, when you have 7 or more authors, well, in fact, 6 or more, within the writing, you put the first name, or more precisely, the first author, and then you put this phrasing, et al. Dot. And this is Latin and means and others. So Kahneman and others in 1991, let's say, showed that yada, 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 you go on. So that's basically what you're saying with that. So that happens, again, when you have 6 or more authors only. If you have 5 authors, then you have to list all 5 authors. If you have 6, then you have to list all 6. But if you have more than that, well, actually 5. If you have 6 or more, then you go this route. So again, this is just an initial listing of verbs. Really, it depends on what is your driving idea or what is your driving purpose for putting that citation right there. Do you want to state do you want to focus on the demonstration that these authors have made? Do you want to focus on the questioning that these authors make? So you would say, as these authors have questioned, so on and so forth. Do you want to focus on their, let's say, their surveys? As these authors have surveyed, so on and so forth. You carry on with the citation. So it really depends on what your focus is, and that's going to define the verb that you're going to use in your writing. So this is for general book publications. Now, what happens when you're using an indirect source? So these are direct sources where this is the author, the publication, and I'm taking this citation directly from that book. But what happens when I find an author? I'm reading a book, and the author is citing somebody else, and I want to take that secondary citation. So this is one way of doing it. There's a variety of ways, but this is just one. It's a very practical one. So what you do is the following. So Johnson argued that, and then whatever the citation is, in parentheses, as cited in Smith, publication 2003. And this is the publication, this is the reference from the bibliography in your bibliography. So primary source, Johnson. Secondary source, Smith, 2003. So I establish in my writing the primary source, but I have to reference the secondary because this is where I'm taking that from. Again, if you can get to the primary source, do so, and state and list your primary source in your book listing. If in case you can't get to it for some reason, then this would be one way of doing that. Yes, so what about some examples here? Let's see some examples of how that kind of pans out in actual practical writing. One classical way of citing authors, which a lot of people don't really use now anymore because we have many more options, but still it's valid. You can, this ellipsis kind of shows us that we have text coming here from this side, and then you have the citation. Notice it's a direct quote. I'm using quotes, so this is verbatim taken from the publication, and then I have to reference my author, which is Richards, comma, publication date. end parentheses, final period. So obviously within my book listing in my bibliography, I would have Richards, 1986, and then the book title. So here I just reference the author and the year publication. Another way of doing that is, again, putting the author name within my discourse, but I still have to put the publication year in parentheses, mentions that, and then the direct citation here. Again, using quotes because it's verbatim, and final period here, and I carry on. This means that, and then your personal opinion about this. Again, you might explain this a little bit in other words, but you're also adding something. Okay, so just try not to just repeat what the author just said, because if you're just going to repeat that, what's the point of writing it again if it's already said? So again, you need to add something, an extra value there, an extra opinion, or maybe this means that this other thing, even though the author left this other thing out, or whatever, you know. Another way of doing that is, as has been shown, grammar is not simply a thing. So notice how we're skipping again the author, but still I need to make reference that what is after this was said by this author in this year, in a certain publication. So in my discourse, I don't name the author, but I do have to put him or her within parentheses right immediately after the actual citation. Last name, comma, publication year. Another way of doing this is instead of putting my verb after the author, I can put the verb before the author. According to Thornberry, publication year in parentheses, and then here I'm taking an exact verbatim quote, 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 opening quote, end quote. Final period here for that quote, and carry on. Grammar teaching as we know it is yada, yada, yada. You carry on with your own opinion now. And here's one final example. You'll notice this reference is a little different because this is in fact an internet reference. And not just any internet reference, it's an internet reference that did not have an author clearly established. So I'm still using it. It's okay to use those. But what we do in this case is we state the, this is one way, I'm kind of going a little classical here. We state the citation, and then at the end of it, again, you could work this in other ways too. But here, instead of writing the author name because there is no clear author, we put some words of the title. So, so this is in fact a longer title. It has, I think, 2 or 3 other words, but I'm just putting the main concept of the title. V is for vocabulary. It kind of gives you a reference to what this refers to. And then the year of this publication on the internet. And obviously in my bibliography, I would have this year and the complete title and the URL for that. Right, so this is just an example for those instances because they tend to happen quite a lot. Okay, and so we've come to the end of this video for citing authors in a basic guideline according to APA. Again, this video is a creation of Teacher Eduardo.net. If in case you're still, just a few things here, if in case you're still having a bit of trouble doing your APA, I highly recommend you visit this citation machine for internet sources. It also can do books, but especially for internet sources, I think it might help you even more. You just type in the URL, and it fetches information from that URL, and it allows you to also include additional information if in case something is missing or it didn't pick it up. And then ultimately it generates the APA style bibliography list, which I think is very, very nice. It'll save you a lot of trouble, and plus it's a little interactive and you kind of enjoy it, and you also learn to do it by yourself with the practice of this tool that we have online. So once again there, my name is Teacher Eduardo, and I hope this video tutorial was useful for you in writing your next academic essay, your next article. Um, be sure to do your bibliography listings in the proper way according to APA guidelines, and also your in-text citations. Thank you for sticking around, and see you next time.